All right, welcome everybody. I think that we are just getting our live video rolling. We are coming to you live from our Barnstar sampler group, and today's video is really kicking off our quilt along, which starts in about an hour. And I know that there's a lot of questions that are popping up, and so today's little video live here in our Barnstar sampler group is really what we like to call an Ask Me Anything video. So if you have questions about whether anything about our quilt along, um, now is the time to ask it. And so we have the event and we're streaming live here and I know that people are starting to pop in. And so the first question came, we had some people submit some questions earlier by YouTube. And our first question that came in was from Carol Ann, and she asked, will we be able to rewatch this video? And absolutely. The video is going to live here in our quilt along group, and we're also going to be posting it over on our YouTube channel next week. It takes some time to kind of download and render the video, but we'll have it over in the YouTube on the YouTube channel next week. All right. Jennifer and Christina and Teresa all had questions about starching. And starching is a really hot button topic in the quilting world. So is pre-washing. So before I answer that question, I'm really going to say that the number one thing in regards to starching is it's a personal choice. You kind of have to do whatever works best for you. My personal choice is to pre-starch my fabric, and I use some pretty hefty laundry products. If the weather is nice outside, I will use the Stay Flow, the one that comes in the giant jug. I'm still perfecting my ratio, my water to starch ratio. Um, and then I will completely submerge my fabric in a bin, working from lightest fabric to darkest fabric. And if I have any sort of a dye bleed, which very, very rarely happens, then I'll switch the starch out. But so if it's warm outside, I'll starch just in like a big washing tub outside and leave the fabric to dry. If the weather's not so hot, we're in Northern California and it feels like it's been raining for like 80 years. So I will start using the Faultless Premium Luxe Spray, which you can find in your laundry iron. It comes in an aerosol can. I prefer the Stay Flow because I'm not using, 8 cans of starch for a quilt, but I'll do that. And when I use the spray starch, if that's what I'm using, what I do is I starch the fabric, and I am pretty heavy handed, but I starch from the wrong side and then kind of let it dry and then iron from the right side. And then that way I'm pretty confident that the starch is being absorbed back in through the fabric up through the front. So I starch from the wrong side and iron once dry from the right side so that the product's kind of being absorbed up through the iron. So if you're just joining us now, this is the Barnstar Sampler Quilt Along kick off, Ask Me Anything. So if you do have questions, you can leave them in the comments field. But I'm going through right now some of the questions that were submitted earlier this week. Teresa has a question about the issue of using a laundry starch, and the issue of like insects or silverfish. And I'm reaching out to you as the community for help with this answer for Teresa. She posted this question in our Facebook group for the Barnstar Sampler as well. And the issue is that I don't know. We don't have silverfish in our area here. We're just east of Sacramento, and it's not an issue for us. So I am in no way qualified to give you advice about silverfish and starching. So if you have any sort of expertise or knowledge, or if there's a resource that you can share with us, please head over to the Facebook group and help Teresa out. Hello, Helen. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so excited too. This is so much fun. Chris has a question about the flatter spray that we had talked about in our deep dive starch video. If you're just joining us, we a couple years ago, for before the beginning of our one of our mystery quilt-alongs, we did a like hour-long deep dive into the merits of like pre-washing and starching and comparing the different types of starches, not necessarily brands, but the different types of starches out on the market. And we did a side-by-side comparison of how they affect your fabric, how much stiffness, how much rigidity they give your fabric. So that whole hour-long video is over on our YouTube channel. And so if you're on the fence about starching, definitely go over and check it out, and do some experimenting on your own as well. But Chris wants to know what my favorite starching or my favorite non-starching product, what the flatter spray does, and is it a replacement for starch or best press? And the flatter spray is not a starch-based product, so it kind of helps smooth your fabric while you're pressing it. Sometimes we have, and you'll see in the video later today, sometimes we have some stubborn corners that when you press them, they just won't stay flat. And so the flatter spray is more of a tool to kind of add some moisture as you're pressing. I press with a dry iron. I don't press with any sort of steam, but sometimes you need to introduce a little bit of moisture to your block to get it to lay flat. And so the flatter spray is for that. With your starch is actually, adding some heft. It's like the difference between like printer paper and cardstock. Starch fabric is kind of the equivalent of cardstock. It's real thick, and it really helps you cut it easily and cut a little bit more accurately. And I think that it helps piece and gets things, makes piecing a little easier and gets things, just to work beautifully together. And so the starch is what's adding that kind of stiffness or rigidity to your fabric. Best press adds a little bit, but not as much, not to the degree as some of your laundry starches. And both of those products really should be applied to your fabric before you do any cutting. And you really want to make sure, if you're going to be using a starch-based product, that you use it before you do your cutting, because it could shrink your fabric just a little bit. And so you don't want to add it to pieces that you cut already, and you absolutely don't want to hit your block with starch, because it could shrink your block. But the flatter spray is really just a nice product that you can kind of put things that you spray onto the block afterwards. It's not going to shrink the block, and you just kind of a little extra help, a little bit of extra moisture if you're kind of trying to tame one of those stubborn blocks into submission. And again, if you're just joining us, if you have any questions about our Barnstar Slampler quilt-along, which is kicking off in less than an hour, you're welcome to leave them here in the comments. And I'm going through some of the questions that we've been receiving over the past week. A question from Barb asked if we've pre-starched the fabric if you're receiving our block of the month fabric shipments. And the question is no. Starching is such a personal choice, and I'm a big fan of it, but that doesn't mean that you are. So the fabric that you're getting if you're part of our block of the month program, where you're getting a fabric shipment from us every month with the fabric for this month's block, that is cut straight from the bolt. It might seem like it has a little bit of a stiffness to it, but that is the sizing that all fabric has on it, that they apply at the mill, and it helps them kind of fold it in half nicely and roll it up on the bolts without creasing. So that's not pre-starched, and you can still starch over the sizing as well. Hi, Vicki. Welcome. So glad you're here today. Jackie had a question about what specific tools are required for this project. And one of the things that is really important to me as a quilt pattern designer, as a pattern author, as a book author, is I want to make my projects as accessible to everybody as possible. And so whenever possible, I write my patterns assuming that you really only have some basic tools on hand. Your rotary rulers, your pressing mat and iron, your sewing machine, your pins. That's what we're assuming that you have on hand. And Very rarely do we have a project that requires some sort of a special shape. Um, if we do, we always include paper templates as an option instead of a specialty ruler. But the Barnstar Sampler book has zero templates, zero specialty rulers required. I know that some people enjoy using foundation paper piecing, but you don't need that for the book. If you feel that it helps you, absolutely use it, but you absolutely don't need it for the book. Um, the majority of the blocks in this book are pieced using my favorite stitch and flip method, where we take squares and rectangles and sew them together at 45-degree angles to make complex geometric shapes without having to cut diamonds or triangles and the lot. And we do this because I think that you get a more accurate block by using the squares and rectangles than you might with the triangles, and B, um, I don't like sewing with bias edges. If I have to, I will. But if I can avoid it, if there's a better way, or a way that doesn't involve bias seams, then that is the path that I will take 95% of the time. That being said, we do have some triangle blocks in the book. And so what we've done is we've mathematically made them larger than you'll need, giving you about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of wiggle room, sometimes a little bit more, so that way if we do have to work with triangles, you've got some leeway, you've got some grace to kind of piece things big um, and then trim them down to size afterwards. Um, let's see. Oh, Sydney, we had a question from Sydney in the Facebook group, and she was wanting to know what my favorite tool is. Um, oh, I'm sorry. I meant to mention back on the conversation of the tools required for the book before we get to my favorite tool. We've shared a mise en place video. Mise en place is a culinary term for putting everything in its place. And so it's a video that kind of explains like what I do before I start any quilt along quilt project, any project for myself, for work, for whatever. And so this video includes a list of must-have tools and a list of nice-to-have tools. So if you have a little bit of room in your quilting shopping budget and are thinking about adding some extra tools, some of the things that are nice to have, like a wool pressing mat and a specific fabric pencil, you can find all of that over on our Quilt Along homepage, or you can find it on our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel has the full video, so you can see photos of all the products, and over on our tutorial section on our website, you can find a written version of that same information. I'm willing to bet that the must-have tools, you most likely have the majority of them already in your sewing space. So Sydney wanted to know what my favorite tool is. And to be quite honest, it's kind of a cheeky answer, but my favorite quilting tool is a good podcast or an audiobook. I get very distracted if I have the TV on. I sew from a studio in my home most of the time, and I have young boys that are rambunctious and it's chaotic. And so something that I can kind of pop into my earbuds and kind of listen and kind of escape a little bit while I'm sewing. I'm a huge fan of historical novels and mysteries, and I like true crime podcasts. I'm one of those. Good morning, Melinda. Oh my gosh, thank you for joining us from Australia so early in the morning. We have had a couple of questions about quilts and quilt sizes. Jennifer and Robin are asking about a king size, and Chris was asking about changing the setting to make a rectangular quilt. So the Barnstar sampler, the sampler itself, is a massively generously sized quilt. It finishes at 80 inches by 100 inches, which is a very generous queen size quilt. Typically queens are about 90 inches by 100, somewhere in that range. So your typical king sized quilt is about 108 inches by 108 inches. So the quilt's already a rectangular, so you can adjust, and mess with your block layout if you like, but it's already a rectangle. It's a really big rectangle, but it's already a rectangle. Um, I have some thoughts about the king size. We don't have instructions for any other sizes of the quilt. You know, you have the pattern in the book for the 80 by 100 inches. If you are looking for some sort of a king size option, I have a couple of thoughts for you. And the first one is take the quilt and rotate it so that the longest side is kind of draped over your bed. So it's sideways on your bed. And if you throw on some shams, if you have like a nice solid covered, solid coverlet underneath, you might be surprised that using the quilt in the 80 by 100 format might get you what you need to kind of give the illusion of a king size bed, kind of draped over the foot, and with the top kind of hidden with pillows and a coverlet. So that's thought number one. Number two, the obvious answer is to make extra blocks to get the quilt to be what size you want. You can fill in with some of our tiny 4-inch blender blocks. You can experiment with making larger blocks. You could be super crafty and add blocks around the perimeter and then kind of trim them down, so you kind of have half blocks or third blocks or whatever. It might create kind of a neat illusion by kind of trimming them down if you want to make the quilt bigger. That way it kind of creates the illusion that the quilt is going beyond the edge of your binding. That's a trick that I like to use with a lot of the design. So, and then finally, option number 3 for getting a bigger quilt would be to add borders. So add borders on the left and right, top and bottom, until you get to the size that you want. All right. We had a whole lot. I'm just looking through to try and make sure we're getting through all of the questions. Hi, Rhonda. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're enjoying the videos. Oh, and good morning to Olympia from Alaska. I'm super excited for this project too. Okay. The question everybody wants to know is about fabric. And this is not necessarily applicable to everybody, but let's see if we can cover as many of these as I remember to write down. Again, if you are just joining us and you have questions for our Barnstar Sampler Ask Me Anything, you're welcome to pop them over in the comments, and I'll try and get through as many as we have time. Kimberly is asking, will there be, if you've purchased a kit or a block of the month or a half-yard bundle from us, will we have backing available? And the answer is very exciting, and the answer is yes. Lori was asking how much you need. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it is listed in the book on the same page where you can find the binding. And Lori asked what we used on our own sample. And I'll be honest and transparent, I don't like seaming fabric for the back of my quilt. I either have my quilter do it. She's amazing at that and happy to do that when she quilts the projects, but it's my least favorite part of the whole thing. So whenever possible, I will opt for 108-inch wide fabric. Our quilt finishes at 100 inches on its biggest side. It's just 80 inches wide. And so about 3 yards of 108-inch wide fabric is perfect. And then you don't have to use any seaming. Good morning, Kathy, and good morning, Heather. So 108-inch wide backing. Very exciting news. And this is very sneaky and cryptic, but more information coming soon. So will we have backing available? Yes. We'll be sharing my brand new fabric collection with Benartex at the end of this month, at the end of April rather. So we have a fabric collection coming out later this fall, and I can't say much about it beyond I will be happy to give you more information about coordinating 108-inch wide backing this coming April when we have the new collection launch. So super cryptic. Yes, it's coming, but there's a reason why it's not available to order yet. All right. Kathy asked about when books are shipping. And I am really excited to say that I just got my FedEx delivery or my UPS delivery notification. The books are landing here in our shop in the next couple of days. So, that being said, you guys, we have exciting news. We have hundreds and hundreds of orders from you. So, from the bottom of my heart, your excitement about this book is amazing, and your enthusiasm about, just starting this project together is fantastic. So, that being said, we have literally hundreds and hundreds of book orders to ship out. So, we will be getting them to you, as expeditiously as we can. It was unfortunate that there was such a delay in the supply, and I just got an email from my editing team at C&T Publishing, which is the new publisher for this book. And you guys are amazing. You've sold out their first print run in like a week and a half. So, again, I am incredibly humbled and grateful and excited that you love this project as much as I do. So, if you've ordered your print books from us, we are getting through the shipments as quickly as we can. They're still on track to be shipping in March and April. We're shipping them out in the order that we received your order. And so all I can say is thanks for your patience, and our team is working as hard as we can to get them to you as soon as possible. If you are a shop owner still looking to order the book, we have C&T is amazing. They've been so fantastic, and they have a second print run coming to their warehouse in mid-April. So they are monitoring everything in their supply levels really carefully, and they're on top of it, and they want to make sure that everybody has the books as soon as possible. So if you are a block of the month fabric member where you get the fabric shipment from us every month, then you got the book with your first shipment. If you haven't received the book yet, and you've ordered it from our website, know that it's still on track for March and April shipping. If you don't have the book yet, or if you just are dying to see a preview, you can still order the print version on our website, and we have an ebook there as well if you'd like to get a head start before we can get orders shipped out. So somebody else also asked about half yard bundles, what they are, what's going on with the shipping. So this quilt has a massive amount of fabric that we used. We made it a scrappy quilt, but if you struggle with scrappiness like I do, you want a full list of the exact materials that we use. And so we've given you that in the book. However, you don't necessarily have to have a line item by line item by line item match to the book. If you want to completely replicate the quilt down to the exact color placement of each block, then you can follow the yardage fabric requirements in the book. But most quilters are finding that our half yard bundles are a really good option for them. And we have 3 half yard bundles available. We have one that has 7 yards, 14 prints of all blueprints, from the navy and indigo all the way through those gorgeous, mid level teals and aquas, all the way down to the real light blues. And then we have a second bundle, 7 yards, with 14 prints that covers the reds and the berries and the yellows and the greens, the prints. And so those 2 print bundles were designed to kind of augment your staff. If you have a ton of reds but you need some blues, then the half yard bundle in blues might be a good option. We have a third bundle that is also a 7 yard bundle, and it is 7 different whites. The majority of them are low volume whites, so they have a very subtle background pattern, and then we have the gray cross weave that we've used in the book, and a solid white. So most quilters will be able to make their entire Barnstar Sampler quilt top with those 3 bundles. If you don't like a scrappy binding, then you might want to purchase 1 additional yard of fabric for your binding, but the vast majority of quilters will find that purchasing those 3, the sets of the 3 blender bundles is more than enough to give them fabric for their full quilt top. So when are they shipping? Our latest bundles, for those of you that bought your bundles in January and February, included a few prints of my brand new fabric collection called Alpine Valley with Benertex that just hit the shops. We just got our shipment yesterday. And so we have about 60 to 75 bolts worth of fabric to cut for you. So again, we're working within the time constraints of how fast we can humanly cut fabric. So they are still on track to ship in March and April as well. And we'll be shipping them again out in the order that we received your order. So if you purchased your bundle in February, we have another fabric shipment coming in another week or two with some new prints, and those are going to be shipping. They're still on track to ship in April. If you are still looking for your fabric, or you decided that you fell in love with some of the prints of the bundles, we still have a couple left, a couple available that are not spoken for. Because we're really going to be spending most of the spring and summer focusing on our Barnstar content and kind of connecting and working together, this is the last half yard bundle offering that we'll have probably until September or October. So will they be available again? If they sell out, most likely, but most likely not until the fall. So someone just messaged me and said, um, is there still space in the block of the month membership program? So remember, our block of the month program is different than our quilt along program. A block of the month membership is where you get a fabric shipment from our studio once a month that includes all the fabric that you need for that block or two blocks. And participation in these kinds of programs, they're a lot to run. They take an incredible amount of coordination here in our studio to get fabric. I mean, we're talking about 8 to 12 cuts of fabric times all of our participants every single month. So our space in that program is really limited. We are currently closed for the group. Most of you, some of you, are receiving your shipments now. And we understand that some of you are just finding out about this and are interested in that block of the month program. It is our intention to have a third group starting sometime in June or July. And if you are interested in that, we have a link on our Quilt Along homepage where you can add your name to the wait list. And when we open registration up for that, I will send you a personal email to the waitlist participants first before we open it up to the general public. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you go and sign up for the wait list and keep an eye out for that email as well. Oh, Shelley. Oh, hi, Shelley. Oh, and I love you're an EY too. Shelley's asking about oversized triangles and trimming them, and will we have enough fabric? And you absolutely will have enough fabric because the cutting instructions in your book direct you to cut the pieces bigger than you'll mathematically need. So I've taken care of all the math for you. You just have to follow the cutting instructions in the book. And the last step for each of those little building blocks, like our hourglass block, is one where the triangles are cut a bit larger than you need and then trimmed down. You don't have to do any of the math. You don't have to do any of the floor planning. All you have to do is follow the cutting instructions, and then the last step of the block is square and trim your unit down to 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches or whatever. And our videos that we share, our monthly videos that we share on YouTube, will also show you how you can use the marks on your ruler to kind of line those up and trim them down. So they don't require any extra math or calculations or foresight. So if you've already cut some of your fabric and you're panicking, don't. The way that we've allowed for this in the book, we've allowed for the units to be cut bigger, and the yardage is already based on those bigger units as well. And somebody was wondering about starching their fabrics and having enough fabric as well. And I am a firm believer in having more fabric than you need, and so our cutting requirements are very generous for this project, incredibly generous. So If we're asking you to use a fat quarter or a fat eighth, we're assuming that you will have at least an inch left over, if not more. So that gives you some wiggle room to starch. So I understand the concern, but we've kind of built that, we've built that in. And if you have questions, you can leave them here in our group, and you can leave them over on um, our Facebook group again as well. All right. Sorry, I'm taking a minute. I don't talk and read well at the same time. Annette wanted to know why we are not following with our quilt along, why our schedule does not follow the order of the blocks in the book. Um, and that is because the blocks in the book go from biggest to smallest. And we're treating this quilt along as a skill builders class. And so it doesn't make sense to start with the hardest, biggest blocks of all. Um, those blocks have loads of skills, and the smaller blocks give you a chance to practice one or two or three of those skills at a time. And so, for instance, today's blocks, we're talking about blocks 10 and 11, which are our ribbon star and our mosaic star. And those are a great intro to stitch and flip technique. We're going to make stitch and flip flying geese. We're going to make stitch and flip square and square blocks. And it's a great way to kind of like dip your toes in and see, what the water's like, rather than cannonballing off the deep end. So that's why we're jumping around. So we also, though, are asking here in the Facebook group that you respect our schedule and that you refrain from sharing your block photos until we've gone over that block for the month. And the reason for this really is that we're a community. We all sew and work at different speeds, but we're here to do this together. And it's really important to me that we're helping and supporting one another across the finish line rather than racing to the finish line. So, will there be cohorts that start later in the year and towards next year? Absolutely. And they will have the benefit of the knowledge we've shared here. But I am asking that here in the Facebook group that you don't work ahead, just so that we kind of maintain that community and we're all crossing the finish line together. All right. Oh, Helen, I'm sorry. I saw your question and I have a note here too. Helen was asking, with the block of the month memberships, are we going to have some sort of an oops bundle available, or are we going to have, some sort of a way to get some extra fabric if you need it? And yes, we are working on putting something of this sort together. I don't have an answer today as far as what that's going to be. We kind of have to get through this next big batch of cutting, and then we'll have some options, whether they're an oops bundle or whether we'll have some additional half yards in our shop. I understand that this is a need, and we're kind of exploring some possibilities. It might be that we just have some scrap bags there. So it's coming, but I don't have a good answer for you yet. And I promise, as soon as I do, I will absolutely share it. And then Cindy wanted to know when we were posting our videos. So the videos are going live on our YouTube channel every third Friday of the month at 11 a.m. Pacific time, so West Coast time. And we've set them up. And so the first video is live in like 27 minutes, and I'm super excited, and I hope you love it. But we've set them up so that they are a kind of a premiere style, and so you can go over and we can, at 11 o'clock, we can all head over to the YouTube channel and kind of watch it together and chat. It's kind of like a little premiere video. So I will leave the link to that video in our Facebook group, our Barnstar group, at the end of this live session. So, but if you still have some time left on your lunch break, or if you're excited for some sewing, plan on at 11 o'clock today heading over to the YouTube channel and watching that live premiere. So, Melinda asked, would you recommend cutting the biggest blocks first and then using the remaining fabrics for the smaller one? This is an excellent question. When you write books, there is kind of a standard format that most publishers like to publish. And so the way that Martingale, when the book was written with them originally, formatted their books, they like to write their cutting instructions from what you use first. But I like to cut my biggest strips first and then cut my smaller ones from the remaining yardage. And to be honest with you, and you might have to do a little bit of calculations to see if this works, but I will typically, like, if I have to cut a 5-inch, a 3-inch, and a 2-inch units, I will cut a 5-inch strip, and then I will cut a 3-inch strip, and then I will cut a 2-inch strip if your yardage allows. And I think in most cases it does. But this way, if you have to go back, say you have done all your cutting and you flubbed up your 5-inch block and you need to cut another one, then you have that strip available. And so that's kind of how I organize my cutting. I will go from biggest to smallest, and leave a little bit of wiggle room, because I can't tell you how many times like a piece wanders off and I'll find it like 3 months later tucked behind my desk or something stupid like that. So I like to cut from biggest to smallest. Now, your block of the month shipments and each of the blocks, assume that you're starting from brand new fabric with every block of the month shipment, with every block of the month, with every yardage for the blocks. And so this is not the kind of program where you need to set ascribe the strip of fabric number 24 from month 1 to use in month 7. We eliminated that, and that's why you will have some extra fabric, but I think that it is easier to give you the fabric that you need each month without assuming, in case your fabric has legs and walks off like mine does, and assuming that's going to happen. We're not asking you to save. So that being said, I think it's a good practice. I left the link to the boxes that I'm speaking about in our Facebook group, but I really like using the 12-inch by 12-inch by like 4-inch thick plastic storage boxes that you can find at most of your big box craft stores. These are really great for storing your fabric for the block as you've cut. Somebody else asked, do you cut your fabric for the whole sampler at once? And I don't have the attention span to do that. I usually cut block by block, and then I label everything by the letters that follow the cutting instructions, because that's how we reference them in the books. And then I store them while I'm working on the block in these 12-inch by 12-inch storage box. And there is a link to the ones that I like in the Facebook group, and I'll make sure I leave it again. But I also have, when I'm working on a sampler project, I also have like a designated scrap basket. So once I'm done cutting for the month and I'm finished piecing and I don't need any extra pieces, Penny the puppy apparently wants to make an appearance in our live. Sorry, she's very nosy. Here's what's going on. I like to have a scrap bin that when I'm done piecing for the month, all of the leftover fabric strips that I didn't use kind of go in that bin, and I will pull from them. I will pull for them as I am ready to cut next blocks. The other thing that is important to remember is that there is really kind of a scrappy element to this quilt. And so if you've read through the book and you've read through the blocks, which I highly recommend that you do, just to get an idea of kind of where we're going, the last 4 or 5 blocks are tiny 4-inch blocks, and they do not require any extra yardage, maybe a little bit of background yardage. But the intention with these blocks is that you pull from your fabric stash and you pull from your scraps as you're sewing, and you make these blocks. And so I think that it's easier to pepper in those 4-inch blocks as you're going along. So after today, you might make 1 or 2 flying geese blocks. But a lot of your scraps are going to be repurposed for those 4-inch blocks that are our last, like we make them in month 12. So we're making them in February of 2024. So don't get rid of your scraps. Don't repurpose them until you finish making those tiny blocks. And we'll talk more in the coming months about when to make those blocks and how. And you might decide that you wait till the very end to make all of them, just to kind of use them to balance out the colors in your quilt. But that's kind of what those scraps are going to be for. And then when you've finished piecing your entire quilt, then you can repurpose those for another project. So, whew. I'm just checking my notes to make sure we got All right. Our live video is coming to the YouTube channel in just about 20 minutes. If there are any questions more that I can answer for you here, you're welcome to pop them into the comments. If you are watching this video later, you're welcome to pop any questions that we didn't cover. I feel like we covered a ton of information today, so thank you. And for those that you joined me live, thank you for your excellent questions. I really can't tell you how excited I am. This is such a labor of love project. Um, this was, for those of you who haven't heard this before, this quilt was drawn during our, like literally 3 years ago this month, during our first few weeks of our COVID lockdown, when my boys were homeschooling and my husband was working from home, and I needed a creative outlet to kind of regulate and calm and provide some sense of stability and normality. So this quilt was drawn at my dining room table with my boys right next to me as we all navigated homeschooling and, kind of the world shutting down. And so, like, it's a quilt that I've been dying to make for years, and I loved putting it together the first time, and I'm just so blown away and excited and grateful for how excited you are all. So you are all about this book. So you have my gratitude, and your excitement makes me even more exciting. So I just want to thank you for joining. Oh, Allison says Penny is adorable. She's very nosy, and she usually doesn't get to come to work with me. So she's very excited to hang out with you guys today, too. She never gets to come in the sewing area, but she's excited to hang out, too. So all right, you guys, thank you for sharing your morning with me, and I'm gonna pop over in a few minutes to the Facebook group, and I will add the link to the watch party so you can join me in about 19 minutes over on YouTube, and we can watch the first video. So again, thanks for joining me, and happy sewing. Oh, and yes, today is the first day you can post your photos of blocks 10 and 11 in our Barnstar Sampler group. So thanks for joining me. I can't wait to see your blocks, and we'll see you on YouTube in about 20 minutes. Thank you guys. Have a great weekend.